So the concept of challenger bank nowadays is very misleading sometimes, right? We have many banks calling themselves challenger banks just for the simple fact that they offer a prepaid card or mobile wallet app. What really makes BNI Europa a challenger bank?
We define ourselves as a challenger bank because we try to focus on innovation. So we actually try to address particular needs of certain segments of customers. Yeah. So we try to really look for these particular niches which allow us to grow without offering the traditional products that all the universal banks offer.
And one of the ways BNI Europa has been using to offer those new products is through partnerships with Fintechs, right? And I believe at this stage you have around 20 active partnerships with Fintechs. With such a crowded and rich fintech ecosystem, what is your criteria to pick the right fintech to work with?
I think the first segment is really the technology support. So when we look to set up a service or have a financial product, we look at the best way to offer it and in a very seamless way to the clients. Then the second segment, I would say, is to get the support from fintechs to diversify our deposit base. And then a third level is actually fintechs that are specialized in the credit space.
But I believe that sometimes there are some challenges in these partnerships, right? Because we know that for large banks, sometimes it's very difficult to operate like startups. And for startups, it's difficult to understand the governance and decision models of large banks, right? In most of cases, we're talking about different organizational cultures, different operating models and ways of working, right? So what is the secret sauce for these partnerships between banks and fintechs to work?
Yes, I agree that we may have an advantage when compared to larger institutions because fortunately we don't have the legacy or the weight of or different decision layers that other large organizations have. We actually respect the startups. We are not trying to obviously change them. The other thing is about economics. And also the secret sauce there is to guarantee that we actually have a share of the economics. So we are not ambitioning to have the whole value chain for us. So we may keep part of the economics and the startup can keep the other part.
Yeah. And definitely the startups right now, the fintechs are moving from monoline services to multi-line. So they're pretty much attacking almost every portion of the banking value chain, right? And this is creating big competition for the large banks. Not your case because you are a digital bank, so you have the flexibility, you have the agility, but we're talking about incumbent banks, right? How can those incumbent banks adapt to this fierce competition, not only from fintechs, but from the likes of Amazons, Apples, Googles, and even telcos, right?
They're going to have a big challenge because typically they are universal banks and one cannot be good or excellent at every single segment and every single product. So they have to adapt to a world where they have to specialize somehow and across probably different jurisdictions to allow for economies of scale. So I only see these banks actually narrowing their offering to segments that probably they will be able to compete when compared to these big techs that you mentioned or fintech companies. Yeah.
So something that you mentioned before is the legacy, right? We know that these big banks, they have the problem of legacy, not only infrastructure, but capabilities and mindset as well is a legacy. But some of the products being developed by these fintechs, they can be replicated by these big banks, right? And there's the thing about most of them don't have patents, which means that any bank can come and replicate those products. And in the last year, we've seen a lot of these incumbent banks attracting top talent from fintechs and challenger banks. And we see more and more big banks investing or partner or even acquiring fintechs. Don't you think that some of these large banks are being underestimated when we talk about this technology disruption race?
Well, they certainly have the investment capability to do that, but I still believe they have to change completely the culture because they still have a lot of layers of middle management. The way the culture of the bank is, it will prevent them to be as nimble and as fast as the typical startup which has no legacy issues. ultimately they'll be able to probably get there, but I think the implementation phase is going to be quite challenging for them.
The rules of the game, as I like to call it, is you don't know the statement. You can only say myth or fact. There's no why or but, right? So let's go just for myth or fact, right? Okay. Not every so-called challenger bank is a bank.
Fact.
Banks will need to become banking platforms if they want to remain relevant.
Fact.
Traditional banks are attacking fintech with fintech.
Fact. Yeah.
Fact. Mm-hmm. The universal banking model is dead.
Fact.
This is your statement. So this one was easy, right? And the last one, the bank of the future will interact in similar ways to Amazon and Google, gaining insights and getting smarter with each interaction.
Fact, I would say.
It's a fact, I agree. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Temos que aproveitar esta vista bonita, não é?
Exato.
Com esta vista, apanhar um dia tão bonito assim em Lisboa, sim. Principalmente porque em Londres tem estado sempre muito cinzento, não é?